The Return, Part 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Reynard. The Return, by H. Beam Piper and John J. Maguire. Chapter 1. Altamont cast a quick, routine glance at the instrument panels, and then looked down through the transparent nose of the helicopter at the yellow-brown river 500 feet below. Next, he scraped the last morsel from his plate and ate it. "What did you make this out of, Jim?" he asked. "I hope you kept notes while you were concocting it. It's good." "The 2 smoked pork chops left over from yesterday evening," Ludens said, "and that bowl of rice that's been taking up space in the refrigerator the last couple of days, together with a little edge powder and some milk. I ground the chops up and mixed them with the rice and the other stuff, then added some bacon to make grease to fry it in." Altamont chuckled. That was Ludens, all right. He could take a few leftovers, mess them together, pop them in the skillet, and have a meal that would turn the chef back at the fort green with envy. He filled his cup and offered the pot. "Caffchoc?" he asked. Ludens held his cup out to be filled, blew on it, sipped, and then hunted on the ledge under the desk for the butt of the cigar he had half smoked the evening before. "Did you ever drink coffee, Monty?" the socio-psychologist asked, getting the cigar drawing to his taste. "Coffee? No, I've read about it, of course. We'll have to organize an expedition to Brazil sometime to get seeds and try raising some." Ludens blew a smoke ring towards the rear of the cabin. "A much overrated beverage," he replied. "We found some once when I was on that expedition into Idaho in what must have been the stockroom of a hotel. Vacuum packed in moisture-proof containers and free from radioactivity. It wasn't nearly as good as Caffchoc. But then, I suppose, a pre-bust-up coffee drinker couldn't stomach this stuff we're drinking." Ludens looked forward up the river they were following. "Get anything on the radio?" he asked. "I noticed you took us up to about 10,000 while I was shaving." Altamont got out his pipe and tobacco pouch, filling the former slowly and carefully. "Not a whisper. I tried Colony 3, in the Ozarks, and I tried to call in that tribe of workers in Louisiana. I couldn't get either." "Maybe if we tried to get a little more power on the set." That was Ludens too, Altamont thought. There wasn't a better man at the fort when it came to dealing with people. But confront him with a problem about things, and he was lost. That was one of the reasons why he and the stocky, phlegmatic social scientist made such a good team, he thought. As far as he himself was concerned, people were just a mysterious, exasperatingly unpredictable order of things which were subject to no known natural laws. And Ludens thought the same thing about machines. He couldn't psychoanalyze them. Altamont gestured with his pipe toward the nuclear electric conversion unit, between the control cabin and the living quarters in the rear of the boxcar-sized helicopter. "We have enough power back there to keep this windmill in the air 24 hours a day, 365 days a year for the next 15 years, he said. "We just don't have enough radio. If I'd step up the power in this set any more, it'd burn out before I could say, 'Altamont calling Fort Ridgeway.'" "How far are we from Pittsburgh now?" Ludens wanted to know. Altamont looked across the cabin at the big map of the United States as they had been, the red and green and blue and yellow patchwork of vanished political divisions. The colours gleamed through the transparent overlay on which this voyage of rediscovery was plotted. The red line of their journey started at Fort Ridgeway, in what had been Arizona. It angled east by a little north to Colony 3, in northern Arkansas, sharply northeast to St. Louis and its lifeless ruins, then to Chicago and Gary, where little bands of Stone Age reversions stalked and fought and ate each other. Detroit, where things that had completely forgotten they were human emerged from their burrows only at night. Cleveland, where a couple of cobalt bombs must have landed in the lake and drenched everything with radioactivity that still lingered after 2 centuries. Akron, where vegetation was only beginning to break through the glassy slag. Cincinnati, where they had last stopped. "How's the leg doing this morning, Jim?" he asked. "Little stiff, doesn't hurt much though." "Why, we're about 50 miles as we follow that river, and that's relatively straight." He looked down through the transparent nose of the copter at a town, now choked with trees that grew among the tumbled walls. "I think that's Alikippa." Loudons looked and shrugged, then looked again and pointed. "There's a bear, just ducked into that church or movie theatre or whatever. I wonder what he thinks we are." Altamont puffed slowly at his pipe. "I wonder if we're going to find anything at all in Pittsburgh." "You mean people, as distinct from those biped beasts we found so far?" "I doubt it," Loudons replied, finishing his calf choc and wiping his moustache with the back of his hand. "I think the whole eastern half of the country is nothing but forest like this, and the highest type of life is just about 3 cuts below Homo neanderthalensis, almost impossible to contact and even more impossible to educate." "I wasn't thinking about that. I've just about given hope of finding anybody or even a reasonably high level of barbarism," Altamont said. "I was thinking about that cache of microfilmed books that was buried at the Carnegie Library." "If it was buried," Loudons qualified. "All we have is that article in that 2-century-old copy of Time about how the people at the library had constructed the crypt and were beginning the microfilming. We don't know if they ever had a chance to get it finished before the rocket started landing." They passed over a dam of flotsam that had banked up at a wrecked bridge and accumulated enough mass to resist the periodic floods that had kept the river usually clear. 3 human figures fled across a sandflat at one end of it and disappeared into the woods. 2 of them carried spears tipped with something that sparkled in the sunlight, probably shards of glass. "You know, Monty, I get nightmares sometimes thinking about what things must be like in Europe," Loudons said. 5 or 6 wild cows went crashing through the brush below. Altamont nodded when he saw them. "Maybe tomorrow we'll let down and shoot a cow," he said. "I was looking in the freeze locker and the fresh meat's getting a little low. Or a wild pig, if we find a good stand of oak trees. I could enjoy what you do with some acorn-fed pork." He looked across the table. "Finished?" he asked Loudons. "Take over then, I'll go back and wash the dishes." They rose, and Loudons, favouring his left leg, moved over to the seat at the controls. Altamont gathered up the 2 cups, the stainless steel dishes, and the knives and the forks and spoons, going up the steps, over the shielded converter, and ducking his head to avoid the seat in the forward top machine gun turret. He washed and dried the dishes, noting with satisfaction that the gauge of the water tank was still reasonably high, and glanced out one of the windows. Loudons was taking the big helicopter upstairs for a better view. Now and then, among the trees, there would be a glint of glassy slag, usually a fairly small circle. That was to be expected. Beside the 3 or 4 H-bombs that had fallen on the Pittsburgh area mentioned in the transcripts of the last news to reach the fort from the outside, the whole district had been pelted, more or less at random, with fission bombs. West of the confluence of the Allegheny and the Monongahela, it would probably be worse than this. "Can you see Pittsburgh yet, Jim?" he called out. "Yes, it's a mess. Worse than Gary, worse than Akron even." "Monty, come here, I think I have something." Picking up the pipe he had laid down, Altamont hurried forward, dodging his 6-foot length under the gun turret and swinging down from the walkway over the converter. "What is it?" he asked. "Smoke,"